Have you ever felt like there's an invisible wall between you and God, blocking the very blessings you've been desperately praying for? Perhaps you've spent years reaching outward, sending prayers into what feels like an empty void, wondering why divine energy seems to flow freely into others' lives, but somehow bypasses yours completely. What if I told you that the greatest spiritual misunderstanding of our time isn't about what you're doing wrong, but about where you've been looking? This fundamental misconception has kept countless sincere spiritual seekers trapped in a cycle of frustration, constantly straining to connect with a divine presence they believe exists somewhere out there beyond their reach. Has this ever happened to you? You face a crisis, perhaps a health scare, relationship breakdown, or financial emergency, and immediately begin praying intensely, begging for divine intervention, yet feeling that heavenly assistance remains frustratingly unavailable. You're not alone. This experience is nearly universal because we've been taught to look in the wrong direction entirely. The revolutionary understanding I'm about to share with you today doesn't just transform your prayer practice. It completely reimagines your relationship with divine energy and how it flows through every aspect of your daily life. The divine flow you've been seeking isn't blocked by some cosmic gatekeeper requiring the perfect passwords or rituals. It's blocked by a single misperception about where God actually is. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover might fundamentally change your entire relationship with spiritual practice. When you truly grasp that divine presence isn't something external you need to strain toward, but rather the very essence of your being waiting to be recognized, everything changes. Prayer transforms from desperate pleading to joyful acknowledgement of what already exists within you. Imagine approaching each day not as a separate entity struggling through life alone, but as a living channel through which divine energy naturally flows. Picture facing challenges not with fear and anxiety, but with an unshakable awareness that you can remove the internal blockages, preventing divine intelligence from solving problems through you. This isn't positive thinking or wishful spirituality. It's practical mysticism that produces tangible transformation in your health, relationships, finances, and inner peace. The 5 steps I'll be sharing today have changed countless lives worldwide, not through magical formulas, but through a profound shift in spiritual understanding. What would your life look like if you stopped trying to convince an external deity to send blessings your way, and instead focused on removing the internal barriers that have been blocking the divine flow that has always existed within you? Perfect and complete. If these teachings on removing blocks to divine flow resonated with you, subscribe to join our community of spiritual seekers who are practicing this recognition in their daily lives. Each new video explores practical ways to experience the divine presence within. In these moments when divine energy seems most distant, the transformative journey begins with what Joel Goldsmith called the practice of the presence. A deceptively simple exercise that creates profound ripples throughout your consciousness. This isn't some complex meditation technique requiring hours of silence in perfect lotus position. It begins with a moment of recognition when you first wake up each morning, before your feet even touch the floor, before your mind becomes entangled in the day's demands. Pause for just a moment and silently acknowledge, the kingdom of heaven is within me right now. This divine flow is my true nature. This tiny decision creates a foundation that shapes how you'll respond to everything the day brings. The hidden revelation most spiritual seekers miss completely is that consistency matters far more than intensity. A brief moment of recognition practiced regularly throughout your day has infinitely more impact than occasional hours of desperate spiritual effort. It's the difference between watering a plant daily with a small cup versus drowning it once a month with a flood. Throughout your day, especially during moments of stress or challenge, take even 30 seconds to return to this inner kingdom. When your boss criticizes your work, when traffic makes you late, when unexpected bills arrive, these are precisely the moments when the practice reveals its transformative power. Instead of reacting immediately from fear or frustration, pause and recognize the truth that exists beyond external appearances. You'll begin noticing subtle shifts at first, a deeper peace in formerly stressful situations, unexpected solutions to persistent problems, a growing sense of guidance in daily decisions. These are signs that you're beginning to remove the internal barriers blocking divine flow. The transformations unfold gradually, but their cumulative impact completely reimagines your life experience. Now, I want to go even deeper into how this understanding applies to specific challenges we all face. Consider health issues, an area where fear can instantly overwhelm our spiritual awareness. When physical symptoms appear, our conditioned response is immediate panic, followed by exclusively seeking material solutions. The breakthrough insight isn't about rejecting medical wisdom or practical care. The journey I'm describing integrates both spiritual understanding and appropriate action. When facing health challenges, first turn within to recognize the spiritual truth. In the kingdom of heaven within you, there is only wholeness, only divine perfection. This recognition doesn't replace medical care, but opens a channel for healing power that transcends material limitations. From this place of spiritual awareness, you can then make decisions about treatment with clarity rather than fear. Think about someone diagnosed with a chronic condition who's been told they'll simply have to manage symptoms indefinitely. From material consciousness alone, this prognosis feels like a prison sentence. But from kingdom consciousness, they recognize that physical appearance isn't the final reality. Their spiritual essence remains whole, regardless of bodily conditions. This recognition creates space for healing that might otherwise be blocked by fear and resignation. You don't ignore symptoms or avoid doctors. You simply bring a different consciousness to the situation. You address physical needs while maintaining awareness of spiritual wholeness. If you've experienced even momentary glimpses where you sense there's more to reality than what appears on the physical surface, write in the comments, "I recognize the wholeness within." This understanding extends far beyond personal healing. The same profound shift in consciousness transforms our relationship with money and material supply. When confronting financial challenges, most people immediately focus on external actions, working harder, cutting expenses, or frantically searching for new income sources. While practical steps matter, the mindset behind those actions determines their effectiveness. The breakthrough insight is returning to the consciousness of the inner kingdom, where divine supply is infinite and eternally flowing. Let me share something from behind the scenes of financial transformation. A businessman I worked with faced complete financial ruin after his partner embezzled company funds. Creditors were demanding payment, legal troubles multiplied daily, and bankruptcy seemed inevitable. Rather than focusing solely on these external circumstances, he began practicing kingdom consciousness each morning and throughout his day. At first, nothing external changed. Bills still arrived, creditors still called, but something shifted internally. The paralyzing fear that had blocked creative solutions began dissolving. From this awareness, right action emerged naturally. He found himself making different decisions, having conversations he would have avoided before, exploring options that fear would have previously ruled out. Within weeks, opportunities appeared that he couldn't have engineered through external manipulation. A former client offered a substantial new contract. An unexpected settlement came through. A strategic partnership materialized. These weren't random coincidences, but consciousness demonstrating its own abundance. The pathway to complete financial recovery opened up not through force or struggle, but through spiritual recognition. This journey of transformation requires something many modern seekers resist: patience. In our world of instant results, we expect immediate spiritual breakthroughs. The hidden truth is that this transformation develops gradually over weeks and months of practice. You won't master this understanding overnight, and that's perfectly natural. Joel Goldsmith himself spent years developing this consciousness through meditation, study, and practical application. What matters is that you begin today with whatever level of understanding you currently possess. The consistency of your practice matters far more than its initial perfection. Some days you'll maintain kingdom consciousness beautifully. Other days you'll forget completely and spend hours in anxiety before remembering the kingdom within. This inconsistency isn't evidence of failure, but the normal rhythm of spiritual development. Consider how a child learns to walk. There are many falls for each successful step at first, yet with persistence, walking eventually becomes effortless. The same principle applies to spiritual awareness. Each time you return to kingdom consciousness after forgetting, you're strengthening that awareness. The path isn't linear. It includes plateaus and even apparent setbacks. But the overall trajectory moves toward increasing spiritual recognition. The profound impact comes in recognizing that you aren't creating this kingdom through positive thinking or willpower. You're simply recognizing what has always existed within you, waiting for your awareness. This revelation transforms spiritual practice from effortful self-improvement to joyful discovery of your true nature. If you've ever experienced the frustration of spiritual growth seeming too slow or inconsistent, write in the comments, "I'm embracing divine timing." The beauty of this practice becomes even more evident when we learn to recognize the subtle transformations that signal our growing awareness. While our mindset often looks for dramatic breakthroughs or miraculous interventions, the true revelations come in quieter moments. As you practice returning to kingdom consciousness, notice the subtle shifts occurring within your daily experience. First, a deeper peace in situations that would have previously triggered stress or anxiety. Then, unexpected solutions appearing for persistent problems that seemed unsolvable from purely material thinking. And perhaps most profound, a growing sense of divine guidance in daily decisions. These might seem like small changes, but they represent a fundamental shift in your inner landscape. You're beginning to live from kingdom consciousness rather than purely from material awareness. It's like learning to see with entirely new eyes. The world hasn't changed, but your perception of it has transformed completely. Where you once saw only problems, you now recognize opportunities. Where you once felt separation from good, you now experience divine presence. A woman in our community described this shift beautifully. After practicing kingdom consciousness for several months, she realized one day that her constant anxiety about the future had been replaced by a quiet confidence. Not because her external circumstances were more secure, they weren't, but because her awareness of the inner kingdom had become more consistent. This didn't mean she never experienced fear or worry again, but those emotions no longer dominated her consciousness or dictated her decisions. The secret pathway to experiencing these subtle shifts is persistence through the initial challenges. This is precisely where many spiritual seekers stumble on their journey. They begin this practice with enthusiasm, expecting immediate dramatic results, perhaps a miraculous healing or sudden financial windfall. When those instant miracles don't materialize, they conclude the approach doesn't work and abandon it. prematurely, returning to the familiar but limiting material consciousness. The critical insight is understanding that spiritual development follows natural laws just as physical growth does. Think about planting a garden. When you place seeds in soil, nothing visible happens immediately. For days or even weeks, you see no evidence of growth. If you grew impatient and dug up the seeds to check on them, you'd interrupt the very process you're trying to foster. Spiritual practice works similarly. The initial work happens beneath the surface of your awareness, creating a foundation for visible transformation that appears in divine timing. Those who persist through this initial phase discover something far more valuable than instant gratification, an inner resource that sustains them through everything life brings. They develop a spiritual resilience that isn't dependent on circumstances being perfect. Subscribe now to continue this journey of spiritual discovery with us. We're dedicated to translating these profound mystical insights into practical steps you can apply immediately in your relationships, work, and inner peace. A businessman shared with me that after 6 months of consistent practice, he faced a crisis that would have previously sent him into panic and despair. Instead, he found himself responding from kingdom consciousness automatically, without the effort it had required earlier in his journey. The practice that had once seemed difficult had become his natural state. This represents the maturation of spiritual awareness. What begins as conscious effort gradually becomes spontaneous expression. If you're committed to discovering the kingdom within, regardless of how long it takes, write in the comments, "I'm in this for the long journey." Now, I want to explore perhaps the most profound transformation that occurs when we remove the barriers to divine flow, the way it completely reimagines our relationships with others. Think about the people who challenge you most, that co-worker who constantly criticizes, the family member who triggers old wounds, or the stranger who cuts you off in traffic. Our instinctive reaction is defensiveness, judgment, or withdrawal. But kingdom consciousness offers an entirely different pathway when interacting with difficult people. The breakthrough insight is recognizing that the divine presence exists within them too, perfect even when obscured by stress, fear, or fatigue. Their behavior may not reflect this spiritual reality, but that doesn't diminish its truth. This recognition isn't about excusing harmful actions, but about seeing beyond the surface to the deeper reality. Imagine returning home after a challenging day to find your partner irritable and distant. From material consciousness, you'd likely react defensively or withdraw emotionally. But from kingdom consciousness, you recognize that they're dealing with their own challenges, that the divine presence within them remains perfect even when obscured. This recognition allows you to respond with compassion rather than escalating the tension. I witnessed this transformation in a corporate environment where 2 executives had been locked in conflict for months. After one began practicing kingdom consciousness, the entire dynamic shifted. Rather than reacting to perceived attacks, she began seeing her colleague through spiritual eyes, recognizing the pressure he was under and the divine intelligence operating even through his challenging personality. Without a single conversation about their conflict, the relationship transformed as her perception shifted. The revelation many spiritual seekers miss is that living from kingdom consciousness doesn't mean escaping daily challenges, but meeting them from a spiritual foundation. This isn't about floating above human experience in some mystical bubble. It's about engaging fully with life's complexities while maintaining awareness of the spiritual dimension behind all appearances. This journey includes both successes and setbacks. Some days you'll maintain spiritual awareness beautifully throughout challenges. Other days, you'll fail completely and spend hours in anxiety or anger before remembering the kingdom within. This inconsistency isn't evidence of failure, but the normal rhythm of spiritual development. behind the scenes of spiritual growth, each return to kingdom consciousness after forgetting builds neural pathways that make this awareness increasingly natural. What initially requires conscious effort gradually becomes your default perspective. The businessman who once struggled to maintain spiritual awareness for even minutes eventually finds it becoming his natural state throughout the day. The decision to practice kingdom consciousness transforms ordinary moments into opportunities for spiritual recognition. Washing dishes becomes a meditation on divine presence. Traffic delays offer space for inner communion. Challenging conversations become invitations to see beyond appearances to the spiritual reality within others. Life itself becomes your spiritual practice, an ongoing opportunity to remove the barriers that block divine flow. The beauty of this approach is how it infuses even the most mundane activities with profound meaning. That stack of paperwork on your desk? No longer just tedious tasks, but opportunities to express divine order and intelligence. The grocery shopping. Not just errands, but a chance to recognize abundance flowing through every aspect of your experience. If you've experienced those moments when spiritual awareness suddenly breaks through in the midst of ordinary activities, write in the comments, "I recognize divinity in the everyday." The true beauty of this practice emerges when we observe how it gradually transforms our entire experience of life. Over months and years of dedicated practice, something truly profound begins to shift in your awareness. The kingdom consciousness that once required deliberate effort becomes increasingly natural, like learning a language that eventually allows you to think in it rather than mentally translating every phrase. You'll notice that you automatically return to spiritual truth more quickly after being momentarily pulled into material fear or concern. This isn't something you force. It's the natural evolution of consistent spiritual recognition. Think of it as building momentum on a journey. Those initial steps require the most energy, but as you continue forward, you develop a rhythm that carries you naturally. A friend described this experience beautifully, saying that after a year of practice, she realized her first thought in challenging situations had shifted from panic to peace. Not because she was trying to be spiritual, but because kingdom consciousness had become her default perspective. The evidence of this transformation appears in practical ways throughout your life. Solutions to problems appear more readily because you're accessing the infinite intelligence of the kingdom within, rather than relying solely on limited personal thinking. Peace becomes more consistent because it's anchored in spiritual reality rather than fluctuating circumstances. Relationships deepen because you're interacting from authentic spiritual awareness rather than ego needs and defenses. The hidden revelation that transforms this journey is letting go of expectations for immediate dramatic results. Our culture conditions us to expect instant transformation, the spiritual equivalent of before and after photos on a weight loss program. But consciousness doesn't transform that way. The changes unfold organically, often so subtly that you don't notice them happening in real time. You may not even recognize the cumulative effect until you look back after 6 months or a year and realize how profoundly different your life has become. One of the most remarkable transformations occurs in your professional life. As kingdom consciousness becomes your natural state, work shifts from being merely a means of survival to an authentic expression of divine creativity flowing through you. This isn't just a nice spiritual idea. It manifests in tangible ways that transform your entire relationship with your career or business. A designer in our community described this shift beautifully. Where she once struggled for inspiration, constantly fighting creative blocks and deadline pressure, she now experiences a natural flow of ideas because she's tapped into infinite intelligence rather than relying solely on personal ability. Her work became not just more productive, but more fulfilling, an expression of spiritual essence rather than ego achievement. The behind-the-scenes revelation is how this consciousness transforms your relationship with challenges. Obstacles that would have previously overwhelmed you begin to feel like interesting puzzles to solve from spiritual awareness. A project deadline that once triggered anxiety now becomes an opportunity to witness divine ideas emerging in perfect timing. A difficult client interaction that would have sparked defensiveness becomes a chance to recognize the kingdom within both yourself and the other person. If you've started to notice your work becoming more of an authentic expression of something greater than yourself, write in the comments, "I'm becoming a clear channel." Now, I want to go even deeper into what may be the most significant breakthrough on this journey of removing the barriers to divine flow. As kingdom consciousness matures through consistent practice, you discover something precious beyond measure, an unshakable peace that doesn't depend on circumstances being perfect. This isn't positive thinking or emotional bypass. It's authentic spiritual awareness that remains steady through life's inevitable fluctuations. This peace becomes your foundation through every challenge, loss, and disappointment. When financial setbacks occur, you still take practical action, but without the paralysis of fear. When relationships face difficulties, you address them directly, but without the drama of emotional reactivity. When health concerns arise, you seek appropriate care, but without being consumed by worry about outcomes. A woman who had practiced kingdom consciousness for several years faced the unexpected loss of a spouse. Friends were amazed at her response, not an absence of grief, but a profound peace that coexisted with natural sorrow. She described knowing beyond intellectual understanding that the kingdom of heaven within had proven itself faithful through the darkest experience of her life. This wasn't resignation or spiritual bypassing, but direct experience of spiritual reality, transcending even death itself. This represents the maturation of spiritual understanding, moving from conceptual knowledge to lived reality. You know from direct experience that spiritual consciousness is the only reliable foundation because you've tested it through real-life challenges. Material conditions fluctuate constantly, but inner truth remains eternally steady. This doesn't make you immune to human emotion, but provides a deeper context for those emotions, like waves on the surface of an ocean that remains undisturbed in its depths. Let's be honest about what this path truly requires. The transformation we're discussing demands a level of commitment that most spiritual seekers are unwilling to make. This isn't a weekend workshop or a 21-day challenge that produces instant enlightenment. It requires daily practice, even when you feel absolutely no immediate results. Faith in spiritual truth when material appearances seem to contradict it completely. And patience through the sometimes painfully gradual development process. Joel Goldsmith taught this path to thousands of students worldwide throughout his ministry. Some experienced dramatic breakthroughs within months. Others worked diligently for years before significant changes appeared visibly in their experience. A few grew impatient and abandoned the practice when immediate miracles failed to materialize. The decisive factor wasn't spiritual talent or divine favoritism, but simple persistence, the willingness to continue recognizing spiritual truth regardless of apparent results. This commitment represents a fundamental paradigm shift in our approach to spiritual growth. Our culture has conditioned us to expect immediate gratification in every area of life, from instant downloads to same-day delivery. We bring this same expectation to spiritual practice, wanting instant enlightenment or immediate healing. The revelation that transforms your journey is accepting that spiritual development follows natural laws that cannot be rushed or circumvented. If you've experienced that profound peace that transcends understanding, even briefly during a difficult time, Write in the comments, "I've felt the kingdom's steadiness," the profound insight that stands at this crossroads of your spiritual journey is that you can begin right now, exactly where you are, with whatever understanding you currently possess. You don't need to master complex theology or achieve perfect meditation first. You don't need special spiritual credentials or decades of study. The kingdom of heaven is within you right now. It has always been there. It will always be there. Your recognition doesn't create it, but simply reveals what already exists eternally. This is perhaps the most liberating revelation of all. The divine flow isn't blocked by your lack of knowledge or spiritual achievement. It's only blocked by a misperception about where God actually is. The transformation begins with a single moment of recognition. The kingdom of heaven is within me now. Divine presence is my true nature. Spiritual perfection exists in consciousness regardless of material appearances. Simply start today, this moment, by recognizing as often as you remember this fundamental truth. Practice this recognition in the morning, throughout challenges before sleep. Be patient with yourself through the inevitable inconsistency. Celebrate small victories. Learn from temporary setbacks. What makes this approach uniquely powerful is that it doesn't require you to change who you are or adopt artificial spiritual behaviors. It simply invites you to recognize your true nature that has always existed beneath the surface of material appearances. Every time you turn within to acknowledge this spiritual truth, you're removing another layer of illusion that has kept you imprisoned in limitation and fear. The barriers to divine flow begin dissolving naturally through consistent recognition rather than through spiritual force or willpower. This isn't about creating something new, but unveiling what has always been there. The journey of awakening to kingdom consciousness doesn't happen in isolation. As your awareness deepens, it naturally ripples outward and touches countless lives. Around you, spiritual truth isn't meant to be held tightly as intellectual knowledge, but shared openly as lived experience. As the barriers to divine flow dissolve in your consciousness, you naturally become a clearer channel for this truth to reach others. This sharing rarely happens through preaching or persuasion. It occurs organically through your transformed presence. People notice the difference in how you respond to challenges, the peace you maintain in chaos, the compassion you extend. Where judgment once dominated, they're drawn to something they sense in you that they intuitively recognize as authentic. A business executive described how, after practicing kingdom consciousness for nearly 2 years, his entire leadership style transformed. Where he once led through force and fear, he now inspired through spiritual presence. His decisions emerged from inner listening rather than external pressure. Team members didn't necessarily know the source of this transformation, but they responded to its authenticity. This represents the maturation of spiritual understanding, moving from intellectually appreciating concepts to embodying them naturally in everyday interactions. You become a living demonstration that removing the barriers to divine flow creates not just personal transformation, but a ripple effect of healing in all your relationships and environments. If this understanding of becoming a clear channel for divine expression resonates with something deep within you, write in the comments, "The kingdom flows through me." As we draw this conversation to a close, I'm reminded of something profound that Joel Goldsmith often emphasized. Spiritual truth isn't meant to be held tightly as intellectual knowledge, but shared openly as lived experience. Your journey of recognizing the kingdom within doesn't happen in isolation. It ripples outward and touches countless lives around you. If these teachings have resonated with something deep within you today, I'd love to hear about your own experiences in the comments below. Simply write, "The kingdom within awakens," so I know you've journeyed with me to the end of this exploration. Your story might be exactly what another seeker needs to hear to begin their own practice of recognition. If you found value in this perspective on stopping the blockage of divine flow, consider gently tapping that like button, not for algorithms or metrics, but as a way of affirming that spiritual truth still matters in our distracted world. It's a small gesture that helps others discover these timeless principles. And if you're feeling called to continue this journey of spiritual discovery together, subscribe to join our growing community of seekers committed to recognizing the divine presence in everyday life. We're exploring these profound truths every week, translating mystical understanding into practical living. There's a video right here about practicing the presence throughout your day that builds beautifully on what we've discussed today. Click and continue with me over there as we explore how to maintain spiritual awareness through the specific challenges and opportunities of daily living. Until next time, remember, the kingdom of heaven is within you right now, waiting only for your recognition.
Most people prayed desperately for years, begging an external God for help, wondering why their prayers seemed to bounce off the ceiling. Joel Goldsmith discovered the shocking truth that revolutionized spiritual healing. We've been praying backwards. The divine isn't outside waiting to be convinced. It's the very consciousness through which you pray. Traditional prayer treats God like a cosmic vending machine. Insert enough devotion, pull the right lever of righteousness, and expect your miracle to drop down. But Goldsmith revealed that this approach actually blocks the very healing power you're seeking. When you beg, you affirm lack. When you plead, you strengthen the problem. The secret isn't asking God to change your circumstances. It's recognizing that God consciousness is already your consciousness, and from that awareness, circumstances naturally align with wholeness. This isn't positive thinking or wishful hoping. It's spiritual law operating through awakened awareness. Imagine discovering that what you've been seeking outside yourself has been the very essence of your being all along. Tonight, you'll learn to pray from this revolutionary understanding that transformed thousands of lives and can transform yours too. Joel Goldsmith spent decades in spiritual search before his illumination came, not through more seeking, but through a moment of complete surrender. In deep meditation, he realized he was trying to become what he already was. The healing presence he'd been praying to was the same consciousness experiencing the prayer. This revelation shattered his entire approach to spiritual practice. Instead of reaching upward for God, he discovered God as the very awareness reading these words right now. Not a distant deity requiring appeasement, but the intimate presence closer than your breath, more immediate than thought itself. From this awakened recognition, Goldsmith began practicing what he called the prayer of recognition rather than petition. Instead of "please heal me," the prayer became, "I recognize the wholeness that I am." Instead of asking for supply, recognizing the infinite source as consciousness itself expressing as abundance. This shift from seeking to recognizing created instantaneous changes in his life and the lives of thousands he taught. Physical healings, financial demonstrations, relationship harmonies, all flowing from this fundamental reversal of spiritual understanding. The prayer of recognition operates on a completely different frequency than petitionary prayer. When you recognize divine wholeness as your true nature, you're not trying to get something from God. You're allowing God to be God as you. This removes the resistance that blocks manifestation in traditional prayer. Think of it like tuning a radio. Petitionary prayer is like shouting at a radio that's on the wrong frequency, demanding it play your favorite station. The prayer of recognition simply tunes to where the music is already playing. The broadcast never stopped. You just found the right frequency. Goldsmith taught that every seeming problem exists only in the realm of appearances, like shadows cast by objects blocking light. When you recognize the light of consciousness, shadows automatically disappear. You don't fight the shadow. You simply turn on the light and reveal what was always true. This isn't about convincing yourself that problems don't exist. It's about recognizing the divine reality that exists regardless of appearances, then watching appearances align with that recognition. Truth doesn't overcome error. It reveals error as having no real existence. Here's the exact technique Goldsmith used that you can begin practicing tonight. Sit quietly and instead of presenting your problem to God, recognize, Divine consciousness is my consciousness now. Feel this not as a hope or belief, but as recognition of what's already true in this moment. When thoughts of the problem arise, don't fight them or deny them. Simply return to recognition. Perfect wholeness is expressing as my life now. You're not trying to create wholeness, you're recognizing the wholeness that can never be absent from consciousness, which is what you are. Practice this for even 5 minutes daily, and you'll notice something remarkable. The desperate energy of needing things to change dissolves into peaceful recognition of what's eternally perfect. From this inner shift, outer circumstances begin reflecting the harmony you've recognized within. This isn't magic or mysticism, it's spiritual law. Consciousness appears as experience, and as you recognize divine consciousness as your consciousness, your experience naturally reflects that divinity. Tonight, you begin praying from the answer rather than from the problem. Sarah had prayed for her marriage for 3 years using every technique she knew: petitions, bargaining, even attempting to visualize her husband changing. Their relationship continued deteriorating until she discovered Goldsmith's approach, and everything shifted within weeks, not through changing him, but through her recognition. Instead of praying, "Please fix my marriage," Sarah began recognizing, divine love is expressing as this relationship now. She stopped seeing her husband as someone who needed to change and started seeing him through the eyes of recognition, as divine consciousness appearing as her beloved partner. The transformation was remarkable. Without any outer action or conversation about their problems, her husband began responding differently. The critical voice softened. The emotional distance closed. Intimacy returned naturally as Sarah maintained her recognition of their divine unity despite temporary appearances. This wasn't about denial or pretending problems didn't exist. Sarah still addressed practical matters when necessary, but she approached everything from recognition of wholeness rather than from fear of lack. Her prayer had shifted from trying to fix what seemed broken to recognizing what was never broken. Michael's business was failing after 20 years of success. Traditional prayers for financial rescue felt hollow and desperate. When he learned Goldsmith's method, he stopped asking for money and began recognizing divine abundance as consciousness itself, expressing through his business activities and relationships. Rather than seeing his challenges as evidence of divine absence, Michael recognized them as appearances in consciousness that had no power to limit infinite supply. He maintained recognition of abundance, even while taking practical steps like restructuring and reaching out to new clients. Within 2 months, unexpected opportunities emerged. A former competitor offered a partnership. Clients who had disappeared returned with larger projects. New revenue streams opened naturally. But Michael understood these weren't rewards for better praying. They were the natural expression of consciousness recognized as abundance. The business recovery taught Michael something profound about spiritual law. Divine supply isn't something consciousness provides. It's what consciousness is. When you recognize your consciousness as divine consciousness, supply appears as naturally as light appears when you flip a switch. Linda had suffered chronic pain for 5 years. Medical treatments provided temporary relief, but the pain always returned. Through Goldsmith's teaching, she learned to recognize divine wholeness as her true being, independent of the body's testimony. This wasn't denial of pain, but recognition of perfect life as consciousness. Each time pain arose, instead of fighting it or submitting to it, Linda returned to recognition. Perfect wholeness is my true nature now. She discovered that consciousness itself is never in pain. Only the body identified with limitation experiences discomfort. Gradually, the pain began losing its grip, not through force or positive thinking, but through consistent recognition of her divine nature. As her identity shifted from someone with chronic pain to consciousness expressing as perfect wholeness, the body began reflecting this inner recognition. 6 months later, Linda was completely pain-free, but more importantly, she had discovered her true identity as consciousness itself. Physical healing was simply the natural reflection of spiritual recognition. She had learned to pray not for healing, but from the wholeness that she recognized as her eternal truth. These transformation stories share one common thread: the shift from seeking divine intervention to recognizing divine presence as consciousness itself. Each person stopped trying to get something from God and began allowing God to be God as them. This recognition created space for natural healing and harmony. The prayer of recognition works because it aligns with spiritual law rather than fighting against it. Consciousness appears as experience, and when you recognize divine consciousness as your consciousness, experience naturally reflects that recognition. This isn't hope or faith, it's understanding operating as demonstration. Tonight you can begin this revolutionary approach. Choose any situation that seems challenging, and instead of asking for change, recognize divine perfection as the truth of that situation now. Feel this recognition not as belief, but as the awareness that you are. Let this recognition be your prayer, or, if these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment. What healing journey resonated most with you? Beyond the basic prayer of recognition, Goldsmith taught complementary practices that deepen this spiritual understanding. The technique of listening takes you even further into the recognition of divine consciousness as your natural awareness. This isn't listening for voices or messages, but listening as consciousness itself. Sit quietly after your recognition practice and simply listen. Not for something to happen, but listen as the awareness in which all experience appears. In this listening, you discover the profound silence that underlies all activity, the eternal stillness that is consciousness aware of itself. This listening dissolves the sense of being a person having spiritual experiences and reveals the truth that you are consciousness itself in which all experiences arise and pass away. Problems exist only in the realm of experience, but you are the aware presence in which they appear. From this listening, solutions emerge naturally, not as mental answers, but as the spontaneous knowing that arises from consciousness itself. You don't receive guidance. You recognize that divine intelligence is the very awareness through which all knowing flows. This transforms decision-making from struggle to natural unfoldment. Another powerful complement to recognition is what Goldsmith called being a transparency. This means becoming so identified with consciousness itself that your personal will dissolves into divine will. You're no longer trying to make things happen through spiritual practice. You become the space through which divine action flows. Being a transparency doesn't mean becoming passive or inactive. It means acting from recognition rather than from personal desire or fear. Every action becomes an expression of divine consciousness rather than an attempt to achieve personal goals. This removes resistance and allows natural harmony to emerge. Practice this throughout your day. Before speaking, recognize divine wisdom as the intelligence expressing through your words. Before acting, recognize divine love as the motivation behind your choices. You become a clear channel for consciousness to express its infinite nature through what appears as your life. This transparency transforms not only your experience but impacts everyone around you. When you're operating as consciousness rather than as a limited person, others feel the presence of that unlimited awareness. Healing and harmony occur naturally in the field of recognized divine presence. The practice of taking no thought represents Goldsmith's most advanced teaching. This isn't about stopping thinking or emptying the mind, but about recognizing that divine consciousness already knows everything that needs to be known. Your role is recognition, not figuring out solutions through mental effort. When faced with challenges, instead of analyzing problems or planning solutions, take no thought. Return to recognition of divine consciousness as your consciousness and trust that the intelligence that created the universe knows how to handle whatever appears in your experience. This requires tremendous faith initially, but as you practice, you discover that consciousness itself contains infinite intelligence. Solutions emerge naturally when you stop interfering with divine wisdom through personal thinking. What seemed like complex problems resolve through simple recognition of what's already perfect. Taking no thought liberates you from the exhaustion of trying to control life through mental effort. You discover that consciousness is self-governing, and when you recognize your consciousness as divine consciousness, your life flows with natural intelligence, grace, and perfect timing. This is living from the answer rather than wrestling with questions. These three complementary practices, listening, transparency, and taking no thought, work together to deepen your foundation in recognition. They're not separate techniques, but different expressions of the same truth. Divine consciousness is your consciousness now. Each practice reinforces this fundamental recognition from a different angle. Listening reveals consciousness as aware presence. Transparency reveals consciousness as expressing through action. Taking no thought reveals consciousness as infinite intelligence. Together, they transform your entire approach to living, from seeking solutions to recognizing the perfection that's always present. Start with whichever practice feels most natural and gradually incorporate the others. Some days listening may feel appropriate. Other times being a transparency serves the situation. Sometimes taking no thought provides the perfect response. Let consciousness itself guide which approach serves each moment. Remember, these aren't techniques to get something from God, but ways of recognizing what God is being as you right now. Every practice deepens your recognition that divine consciousness is not something you access. It's what you are. From this recognition, your entire life becomes a demonstration of divine presence. Many people struggle with doubt when first practicing recognition. If divine consciousness is my consciousness, why do I still experience problems? This question reveals a fundamental misunderstanding that blocks progress. Recognition doesn't eliminate appearances. It reveals what's true regardless of appearances. Doubt often arises because we expect recognition to immediately change outer circumstances. But consciousness appearing as experience includes all experiences, both harmonious and challenging. Recognition doesn't control appearances. It recognizes what remains perfect regardless of what appears in experience. When doubt arises, don't fight it or feel like you're failing spiritually. Simply recognize doubt as another appearance in consciousness. Divine consciousness is perfectly present even when doubt appears. The recognition of perfection remains true whether you feel it or not. This understanding frees you from the pressure of maintaining positive feelings or spiritual experiences. Recognition is not a feeling or state, it's the truth of consciousness itself. Whether you feel connected or disconnected, divine consciousness remains your consciousness. This removes the burden of spiritual performance. Another common obstacle is trying to use recognition to manipulate outcomes. The mind thinks, if I recognize abundance enough times, money will appear. This approach turns recognition into a sophisticated form of petition, which blocks the very flow it seeks to create. True recognition has no agenda for outer change. You recognize divine perfection because it's true, not because you want circumstances to improve. This pure recognition without motive creates the inner space where natural harmony can emerge without resistance or manipulation. When you catch yourself using recognition to get results, gently return to recognizing for its own sake. Divine consciousness is infinitely worthy of recognition, regardless of what it produces in experience. This worship-like recognition dissolves the manipulation that blocks natural demonstration. The paradox is that recognition without agenda often produces the most dramatic outer changes, while recognition with agenda typically produces struggle and frustration. Let recognition be its own reward, and you'll discover that consciousness naturally expresses as the harmony, abundance, and wholeness that you are. Impatience represents another significant challenge. The mind wants to see results quickly and interprets delays as evidence that recognition isn't working. But consciousness operates according to divine timing, not human impatience. Your role is recognition. Timing belongs to infinite intelligence. Some demonstrations appear quickly, others unfold gradually, and some involve experiences that initially seem contrary to your prayers. Divine consciousness sees the bigger picture that personal perspective cannot perceive. Trust the intelligence that governs galaxies to handle the timing of your experience. Impatience often masks a subtle lack of faith in the perfection of what's unfolding. When you truly recognize divine consciousness as your consciousness, you trust that whatever appears is consciousness knowing and expressing itself perfectly, even when appearances seem challenging or delayed. Use impatience as a call to deeper recognition. Instead of wondering why things haven't changed yet, recognize the divine perfection of this moment, including your impatience. This transforms waiting from frustration into recognition, and recognition creates the inner space where natural timing can unfold without resistance. The final major obstacle is spiritual pride. The subtle satisfaction of feeling more evolved or enlightened than others because you practice recognition. This pride actually blocks the humility necessary for deep recognition and creates separation where unity should be recognized. True recognition reveals that consciousness is the same in everyone. The divine presence you recognize as your consciousness is identical to the divine presence appearing as every person you meet. Recognition dissolves the illusion of spiritual superiority and reveals universal divine identity. When spiritual pride arises, recognize it as consciousness appearing as the experience of pride. Don't judge it or try to eliminate it, but include it in your recognition of divine consciousness expressing in all forms. This dissolves pride naturally and returns you to authentic recognition. These obstacles, doubt, manipulation, impatience, and pride, are natural parts of the spiritual journey. They're not evidence of failure, but opportunities for deeper recognition. Each challenge invites you to recognize divine perfection even in imperfect appearances, which deepens your understanding of consciousness itself. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment. Which obstacle are you ready to transform now? Advanced practitioners learn to maintain recognition during daily activities rather than limiting it to meditation periods. This transforms ordinary moments into continuous spiritual practice. Washing dishes becomes recognition of divine consciousness, expressing as cleanliness and order. Driving becomes recognition of consciousness appearing as movement and direction. The key is remembering that consciousness is indivisible. The same awareness present during formal spiritual practice is present during every mundane activity. You don't need to feel spiritual or peaceful to practice recognition. Consciousness remains perfect regardless of the activity or emotion appearing within it. Start with simple activities. While cooking, recognize divine consciousness as nourishment and care. While working, recognize consciousness as intelligence and creativity expressing through your tasks. This gradually dissolves the separation between spiritual practice and daily living. As recognition becomes natural during routine activities, you'll discover that your entire life becomes a meditation. Every moment offers the opportunity to recognize divine consciousness expressing itself as whatever appears. This transforms living from a secular experience to a continuous spiritual practice. Relationship challenges provide powerful opportunities for advanced recognition practice. Instead of seeing others as separate people who need to change, recognize divine consciousness as the true identity of everyone you encounter. This doesn't deny personality differences but recognizes the underlying unity. When someone triggers anger or frustration, instead of reacting from personality, recognize divine consciousness appearing as both your experience and their expression. This doesn't mean accepting harmful behavior, but responding from recognition rather than from personal reaction. Practice seeing through appearances to divine reality. The difficult boss is consciousness appearing as authority. The challenging spouse is consciousness appearing as intimate relationship. The annoying neighbor is consciousness appearing as community. This recognition transforms relationships from personality conflicts to spiritual opportunities. Advanced practitioners discover that as they consistently recognize divine consciousness in others, others naturally begin expressing more harmoniously. Not because you've manipulated them, but because recognition creates a field of consciousness in which harmony is the natural expression. Your recognition of their divinity calls forth their divinity. Financial challenges offer another arena for advanced recognition practice. Instead of seeing money as scarce resources requiring careful management, recognize abundance as consciousness itself, expressing as infinite supply. This doesn't encourage financial irresponsibility, but transforms your relationship with material resources. Practice recognizing consciousness as abundance in every financial interaction. Paying bills becomes recognizing divine circulation. Earning money becomes recognizing consciousness, expressing as value exchange. Even financial challenges become opportunities to recognize the infinite nature of consciousness appearing as supply. Advanced practitioners understand that true supply is consciousness itself. Money, food, shelter, and resources are appearances of infinite abundance in material form. When you recognize consciousness as abundance, resources appear naturally to meet every need without struggle or anxiety. This recognition liberates you from financial worry and scarcity consciousness. You still handle money responsibly and make practical decisions, but from recognition of abundance rather than fear of lack. This inner shift often produces dramatic improvements in outer financial circumstances. Health challenges provide the most profound opportunities for recognition practice. Instead of seeing the body as a physical mechanism requiring medical intervention, recognize consciousness as perfect wholeness, expressing as your embodied experience. This complements medical care rather than replacing it. Practice recognizing divine consciousness as the life that animates your body. Recognize consciousness as the intelligence that governs every cell, organ, and system. When symptoms appear, recognize them as appearances in consciousness that have no power to limit or define your divine wholeness. Advanced recognition sees through the appearance of illness to the perfect wholeness that consciousness is. This doesn't deny symptoms or ignore medical guidance, but maintains recognition of spiritual truth regardless of physical appearances. Many practitioners experience profound healing through this recognition. The deepest recognition reveals that you are not a body having consciousness, but consciousness appearing as embodied experience. From this recognition, the body naturally reflects the wholeness, vitality, and perfect life that consciousness is. Health becomes the natural expression of recognized spiritual identity. After months or years of consistent practice, recognition becomes so natural that you rarely remember living any other way. The person who used to pray desperately for change has dissolved into consciousness, recognizing itself as the very wholeness that was being sought. This is spiritual maturity. From this established recognition, life flows with remarkable ease and grace. Challenges still appear, but they're met with immediate recognition rather than personal reaction. Solutions emerge naturally because you're living from the intelligence of consciousness itself, rather than from limited personal perspective. Others notice the transformation even when you don't mention spiritual practice. There's a quality of presence, peace, and natural wisdom that emanates from someone established in recognition. You become a blessing wherever you go because consciousness recognizes itself through your presence. This maturity brings deep gratitude for the journey, including all the challenges that deepened recognition. You understand that every difficulty was consciousness creating opportunities for deeper self-recognition. Nothing was ever wrong. Everything served the awakening that you now embody. The ultimate recognition reveals that there was never anyone practicing recognition and nothing to be recognized. There is only consciousness being itself as the totality of experience. The seeker, the practice, and the sought are all appearances of the same divine consciousness that you are. This final recognition doesn't eliminate the person but reveals the person as consciousness appearing as individual expression. You continue living, working, and relating, but from the understanding that all experience is consciousness knowing itself in infinite ways. This is true non-duality. From this understanding, every moment becomes perfect exactly as it is, not because circumstances are always pleasant, but because you recognize all experience as consciousness expressing its infinite nature. Joy and sorrow, success and failure, health and illness, all equally divine consciousness and appearance. This doesn't create indifference or passivity. You continue caring, acting, and responding to life, but from the recognition that consciousness itself is living as all experience. Love becomes natural because you recognize yourself as the consciousness appearing as everyone and everything you encounter. Living from ultimate recognition transforms your impact on the world. You become a presence of peace, healing, and awakening wherever you go. Not through doing special spiritual things, but through being established in the recognition of what you are. Consciousness blesses itself through your recognition. Others are naturally drawn to this presence even if they don't understand why. You become a magnet for those ready for deeper spiritual understanding. Your conversations naturally turn to truth because consciousness recognizes itself and seeks to awaken itself through every encounter. This influence happens effortlessly because you're no longer trying to help or heal anyone. You simply live from recognition, and that recognition creates a field where others naturally remember their own divine nature. Your greatest service is being established in truth rather than doing spiritual work. The ripple effect extends far beyond your personal interactions. Every moment of recognition contributes to the awakening of human consciousness. You discover that your individual recognition was never separate from universal recognition, consciousness awakening to itself through the appearance of your life journey. Tonight you've discovered the secret that Joel Goldsmith spent his lifetime sharing. Prayer works when you stop praying from the problem and begin praying from the answer. Divine consciousness is your consciousness now. This isn't a hope or belief. It's the recognition that transforms everything. You now understand why most prayers never get answered. They're asked from separation rather than from unity. The divine presence you've been seeking outside yourself is the very awareness through which you've been seeking. Recognition ends the search and begins the demonstration of what you've always been. Tomorrow morning, instead of asking God to fix your life, recognize divine consciousness as your consciousness and watch how differently your day unfolds. This isn't magic. It's spiritual law operating through awakened awareness. Your recognition creates space for natural harmony to emerge. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new path. Right now, you are carrying burdens that were never meant to be yours. Joel Goldsmith discovered something revolutionary about human suffering that the world kept hidden from you. What if I told you that 90% of your pain exists only because you believe it must? Your consciousness holds the key to instant freedom. The secret lies not in fighting your problems, but in understanding their true nature. Goldsmith taught that suffering is always a case of mistaken identity. You have been living as if you are the wave, forgetting you are the entire ocean. This fundamental shift in awareness dissolves problems at their source, not through struggle. Every moment you spend trying to fix, change, or improve your circumstances, you reinforce the very illusion causing your pain. Instead, Goldsmith revealed a simple practice that returns you to your true nature. When you remember what you really are, suffering becomes impossible because there is no separate self to suffer. This is not positive thinking or denial. This is recognition of what has always been true. Your real identity has never been touched by any problem, limitation, or fear. The practice begins with one powerful realization that changes everything instantly. The first step is shocking in its simplicity. Stop trying to heal yourself. Stop trying to change your circumstances. Stop trying to become enlightened. These very efforts are what maintain the illusion of separation. Goldsmith called this the practice of non-resistance, but it goes deeper than acceptance. You must recognize that the you who suffers does not actually exist. This sounds abstract until you experience it directly. Close your eyes and try to find the sufferer. Look for the one who is in pain, worried, or afraid. Search carefully in your consciousness. What you will discover will astound you. There is awareness of suffering, but no actual sufferer. There is knowing of problems, but no problem haver. This recognition is not philosophical theory, but direct experience. When you cannot locate the sufferer, suffering loses its foundation. The wave discovers it was always the ocean pretending to be separate. Practice this now. Instead of identifying with your experiences, rest as the awareness that witnesses them. This shift from being the character in the drama to being the space in which all dramas appear is the beginning of true freedom from all suffering. Joel Goldsmith emphasized that your true nature is consciousness itself, not the contents of consciousness. Every problem you face is happening to consciousness, not as consciousness. This distinction changes everything. Pain appears in awareness like a cloud in the sky, but awareness remains untouched and unlimited. The suffering personality is like a character in a movie believing the drama is real. But you are not the character. You are the screen on which all characters appear. The screen is never damaged by any movie played upon it. Wars, romance, tragedy, comedy all come and go, leaving the screen pristine and unaffected. When you rest as this aware presence, problems continue to appear but lose their sting completely. They become like shadows that cannot harm light itself. Your circumstances may remain unchanged initially, but your relationship to them transforms instantly. You discover unshakable peace in the midst of any storm. This awareness is not something you must develop or achieve. It is what you already are beneath all the mental noise and emotional turbulence. Recognition of your true nature is instantaneous, but living from this understanding consistently requires gentle, persistent practice and remembrance. The practice Goldsmith taught dissolves suffering without fighting it. Each time you notice yourself caught in worry, fear, or pain, pause and ask, who is aware of this suffering? The answer reveals your true identity as the unchanging witness of all changing experiences. This simple inquiry short-circuits the entire mechanism of personal suffering. Most people try to escape suffering by changing their thoughts or circumstances. This approach strengthens the very sense of being a separate person who needs fixing. Instead, question the reality of the sufferer itself. When you cannot find anyone actually suffering, the whole problem dissolves like a mirage. This is not denial or spiritual bypassing. Practical challenges still require practical action, but you handle life's difficulties from a place of inner stillness rather than reactive fear. Your responses become wise and effective because they arise from clarity rather than confusion and desperation. The transformation happens gradually as you consistently return to this recognition. Some days the old patterns feel very real and convincing. Other days you rest effortlessly in your true nature. Both experiences are perfect steps in awakening to the truth that suffering was always optional. Margaret came to Goldsmith's classes consumed by financial terror. For months, she practiced his technique of resting as awareness rather than trying to solve her money problems. One morning, while sitting quietly, she realized something extraordinary. The awareness observing her financial fears was itself completely abundant and free. This recognition changed everything instantly. The same bills existed, the same bank balance showed, but Margaret no longer experienced herself as someone who could be threatened by circumstances. She moved through her days from this inner abundance, making decisions from wisdom rather than panic and scarcity. Within 6 weeks, unexpected opportunities began appearing naturally, not because she manipulated anything, but because her consciousness had shifted from lack to wholeness. She attracted solutions effortlessly because she was no longer pushing them away with desperate energy. Her outer world reflected her inner transformation. The remarkable part was that Margaret's financial situation improved, but more importantly, she discovered that her sense of security had never actually depended on external circumstances. She had found the source of true abundance within her own being, which could never be taken away by any external condition. David struggled with chronic anxiety for 15 years. He tried therapy, medication, meditation techniques, but nothing provided lasting relief. Then he discovered Goldsmith's approach. Instead of trying to cure his anxiety, he began investigating who was anxious. This simple shift changed his entire experience of life. Each time anxiety arose, David would pause and search for the anxious person. He found thoughts about anxiety, physical sensations of anxiety, but never an actual anxious entity. This discovery was initially shocking, then profoundly liberating. How can you suffer when there is no sufferer to be found anywhere? The anxiety patterns continued appearing for several months, but David's relationship to them completely transformed. Instead of being overwhelmed by anxious thoughts, he watched them arise and pass away in the space of awareness. They lost their power to control his behavior and emotional state. After 8 months of this practice, David noticed that anxiety rarely appeared at all. When it did surface occasionally, it felt like weather passing through the sky of his awareness. He had discovered what Goldsmith taught, that our true nature is the peace that surpasses all understanding, always present beneath surface disturbances. Sarah's marriage was failing after 23 years. Instead of fighting for or against the relationship, she applied Goldsmith's consciousness technique to her emotional turmoil. She began resting as the awareness that witnessed her hurt, anger, and disappointment without trying to change or fix any of it. This practice revealed something unexpected. The awareness observing her marital problems was itself completely whole and unbroken. From this place of inner completeness, Sarah could respond to her husband with genuine love, rather than reactive neediness or defensive anger. Her energy completely shifted from demanding to giving. Her husband noticed the change immediately. Without Sarah trying to control or manipulate anything, their dynamic began transforming naturally. Old patterns of conflict dissolved as Sarah consistently related from her true nature rather than her wounded personality. The relationship didn't require fixing because Sarah no longer felt broken. Whether the marriage ultimately continued or ended became less important than the profound peace Sarah discovered within herself. She had learned that her happiness and wholeness never depended on anyone else's behavior. This inner freedom allowed authentic love to flow naturally without agenda or attachment to outcomes. Through Goldsmith's consciousness approach, thousands have discovered that suffering is always optional, even in the most challenging circumstances. The technique works because it addresses the root cause rather than symptoms. When you recognize your true nature as awareness itself, problems lose their ability to disturb your fundamental peace and freedom. If these transformation stories inspire you to discover your own freedom from suffering, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment. Which story resonated most deeply with your heart? Beyond the primary technique, Goldsmith taught complementary practices that deepen your recognition of consciousness. The first is called impersonal healing. Instead of seeing yourself as someone with problems, begin seeing through the illusion entirely. Problems are not personal possessions but temporary appearances in the field of awareness. When physical pain arises, instead of thinking, "my back hurts," recognize, there is an experience of back pain appearing in consciousness. This subtle shift removes the false sense of ownership that intensifies all suffering. You are not the owner of experiences. You are the space in which all experiences appear and disappear. Practice this with every challenging situation. There is anxiety appearing instead of "I am anxious." There is sadness arising rather than "I am sad." This grammatical change reflects a profound spiritual truth. You are the unchanging awareness within which all states come and go like passing weather. This impersonal perspective immediately reduces the intensity of difficult emotions and physical sensations. When you stop claiming ownership of temporary experiences, they lose their power to define or control you. You discover yourself as the vast space of consciousness rather than its limited contents. Another powerful technique Goldsmith taught is truth realization. When faced with any problem, instead of trying to solve it, realize the truth about your identity. Remind yourself, "I am not the body that can be sick. I am not the mind that can be confused. I am not the person who can lack anything essential." This is not denial, but recognition of what you fundamentally are beneath all appearances. Your true nature as consciousness is never sick, never confused, never lacking. When you rest in this understanding, problems may continue appearing, but they cannot touch your essential being or disturb your inner peace. Goldsmith discovered that dwelling in truth realization dissolves problems more effectively than trying to fix them directly. Truth has inherent healing power. When you align with reality rather than illusion, your outer world begins reflecting this inner clarity and wholeness in practical, tangible ways. Practice this now. Whatever challenge you currently face, recognize that your true self is completely untouched by this situation. Feel the peace and freedom that is always present when you rest in your real identity as pure, aware presence rather than the fictional character who seems to have problems. The third complementary practice is conscious non-reaction. Most suffering comes from our resistance to what is already happening. Goldsmith taught that when you fully accept the present moment without trying to change it, you discover the peace that was always here underneath your struggling against reality. This does not mean becoming passive or failing to take practical action. It means responding from inner stillness rather than emotional reactivity. When you stop fighting what is, you can see clearly what needs to be done, if anything. Most problems resolve naturally when we stop feeding them with our resistant energy. Practice allowing whatever is happening right now to be exactly as it is. Notice the immediate relief that comes from dropping your internal argument with reality. This acceptance is not resignation, but recognition that peace is available in any circumstance when you stop demanding that life be different. From this state of conscious non-reaction, you become incredibly effective in handling life's challenges. Your actions arise from wisdom rather than fear, from love rather than defensiveness. You discover that most situations require much less effort and worry than you previously believed necessary for successful living. The final complementary technique is identity anchoring. Throughout your day, repeatedly return to the recognition of what you truly are. Set gentle reminders to pause and rest as awareness itself, rather than getting lost in the drama of personal identity and its endless concerns and fears. You can practice this anywhere, in traffic, during meetings, while cooking, before sleep. Simply ask, what am I beneath all these thoughts and experiences? Rest in the aware presence that is looking through your eyes right now. This presence is your true face, unchanged by any life circumstance. The more consistently you anchor in your real identity, the less convincing the stories of limitation and suffering become. They begin feeling like old movies you have watched many times. Familiar, but no longer compelling or believable. You see through the illusion of being a separate person who can be threatened. After several months of regular identity anchoring, you will notice that consciousness techniques become effortless and natural. You live increasingly from your true nature rather than visiting it occasionally. This is the goal, not peak experiences of freedom, but ordinary, consistent recognition of what you have always been. The most common obstacle students face is the mind's resistance to these simple truths. Your thinking patterns have been reinforcing the illusion of separation for decades. When you begin practicing consciousness techniques, old mental habits will seem to fight back with increased intensity and frequency. This resistance is actually a positive sign that the practices are working. Like fever breaking an illness, mental turbulence often increases temporarily as false beliefs lose their grip on your identity. Goldsmith called this the darkest hour before dawn phenomenon. Persistence through this phase leads to profound breakthrough. Do not be discouraged when old patterns of worry, fear, and suffering seem stronger than ever. This is the ego's last desperate attempt to maintain control. Continue returning to the recognition of your true nature as awareness itself. The storm passes quickly when you do not feed it with your attention and belief. Remember that transformation rarely happens smoothly or linearly. Some days you will feel completely free from all suffering. Other days, old patterns will feel overwhelmingly real. Both experiences are perfect parts of the awakening process. Trust the intelligence that is orchestrating your liberation from all unnecessary pain. Another challenge is the tendency to turn consciousness techniques into new forms of mental effort. Students often strain to find awareness or become consciousness, missing the point entirely. You cannot achieve what you already are. Recognition is effortless because it discovers what has always been present. If you find yourself working hard to be aware, you are trying too hard. Awareness is the most natural thing possible. It is what you are using right now to understand these words. Rest in the ease of simply being conscious rather than trying to accomplish consciousness as a goal or achievement. The practices Goldsmith taught are invitations to stop effort, not increase it. When you notice yourself struggling with any technique, pause and laugh gently at the cosmic joke. You are trying to find what is already here, achieve what you already are, become what you have never stopped being. This recognition of the effortless nature of truth eliminates spiritual striving and seeking. You discover that enlightenment is not a future attainment, but the recognition of your present reality. Peace is not something you get. It is something you are when you stop trying to be something other than what you naturally are. Many students worry that accepting their true nature means becoming passive or losing motivation for practical living. This concern reveals a misunderstanding of consciousness work. Recognizing yourself as awareness actually makes you more effective, not less, because your actions arise from clarity rather than confusion and desperation. When you rest in your true identity, you still pay bills, maintain relationships, pursue goals, and handle challenges. But these activities happen from inner peace rather than anxiety. You engage fully with life while remaining inwardly free from attachment to outcomes and resistance to difficulties. Goldsmith lived as a successful teacher, author, and healer while maintaining perfect equanimity in all circumstances. Consciousness realization enhances your effectiveness in the world because you respond wisely rather than react emotionally. Your decisions become clearer, your relationships more authentic, your work more fulfilling. The fear of becoming passive dissolves when you discover that authentic action is far more powerful than desperate effort. When you operate from your true nature, you tap into the infinite intelligence and energy that creates and sustains the entire universe. Nothing you could accomplish through personal struggle compares to what flows through you naturally. The deepest challenge is the addiction to being someone with problems. Strange as it sounds, most people unconsciously cherish their difficulties because suffering provides a sense of identity and purpose. Without problems to solve, who would you be? This question terrifies the ego, but liberates your true self. Goldsmith observed that people often resist healing because they fear losing their familiar sense of self. Being a seeker or victim or striver feels more substantial than resting as contentless awareness. The mind prefers a dramatic identity, even a painful one, to the simplicity of just being. This addiction to problems explains why many people sabotage their own healing and happiness unconsciously. They approach consciousness techniques hoping to improve their suffering rather than transcend the sufferer entirely. They want a better dream rather than waking up completely from the dream of separation. If these insights about overcoming resistance speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment, which obstacle are you ready to release and transform now? Advanced practitioners learn to apply consciousness principles in the most challenging life situations. When diagnosed with serious illness, instead of identifying as a sick person fighting disease, you rest as the awareness within which the body's condition appears. This shift often produces remarkable healing, but more importantly, unshakable peace. Financial crises become opportunities to discover your true source of security. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who lacks money, recognize yourself as the consciousness that witnesses financial circumstances. From this inner abundance, practical solutions arise naturally and effortlessly without panic or desperation. Relationship conflicts transform when you stop defending a fictional sense of self and rest in your true nature. When there is no separate person to protect or justify, love flows naturally even toward those who seem to oppose you. This disarms conflict at its source and often heals relationships miraculously. Even facing death loses its terror when you recognize your true identity as deathless awareness itself. The body may pass away, but consciousness is eternal and indestructible. This recognition brings profound peace to end-of-life experiences and eliminates the fear that dominates so much of human existence unnecessarily. Daily life integration requires consistent practice of seeing through the illusion moment by moment. While stuck in traffic, instead of being an irritated driver, rest as awareness witnessing the experience of traffic. The situation remains the same, but your inner peace remains undisturbed by external circumstances. During difficult conversations, practice speaking from your true nature rather than defending personality positions. When someone criticizes or attacks you, remember that your real identity cannot be threatened by any words or opinions. This inner security allows you to respond with love rather than defensive reactivity. At work, handle stress by recognizing that the awareness observing workplace pressure is itself completely calm and unaffected. You can engage fully with professional demands while maintaining inner tranquility. Your performance often improves because clarity replaces anxiety as your operating system. Even mundane activities like washing dishes or waiting in lines become opportunities to anchor in consciousness. Instead of living on autopilot, use ordinary moments to remember your true nature. This transforms daily life into continuous spiritual practice without requiring additional time or special circumstances. The deepest integration happens when consciousness recognition becomes so natural that you rarely forget your true identity. Old patterns of suffering may still arise occasionally, but they feel like distant memories rather than compelling realities. You watch them with compassionate amusement rather than getting swept away. This stage brings incredible creativity and spontaneity because you are no longer constrained by limiting beliefs about what you can accomplish or deserve. Life becomes an adventure of discovery rather than a problem to solve. You realize that consciousness is inherently creative, intelligent, and benevolent. Relationships deepen profoundly when you consistently relate from your true nature. Others feel the peace and love radiating from your being and often experience their own healing simply through contact with your presence. You become a blessing to everyone you encounter without trying or striving. Physical health often improves dramatically as stress dissolves and the body's natural healing intelligence operates without interference from mental resistance. You may look years younger and feel more energetic because you are no longer depleting yourself with unnecessary psychological suffering and internal conflict. Master practitioners develop the ability to maintain consciousness recognition even during intense challenges that would previously have completely overwhelmed them. They discover an unshakable core of peace that remains steady through any life storm, whether personal loss, physical pain, or external chaos. This mastery is not about achieving a perfect life without problems, but about maintaining perfect inner freedom regardless of outer circumstances. You become like a mountain that remains unmoved by changing weather. Storms may rage around you, but your essential nature remains calm and unaffected. Others begin seeking your guidance naturally because they sense the authentic peace and wisdom you embody. You find yourself helping people not through advice or techniques, but simply through your presence. Your consciousness has become a healing influence that requires no words or actions. The ultimate realization is that your true nature as awareness is the same consciousness that creates and sustains the entire universe. You discover yourself as the one infinite being appearing as all the countless forms and experiences. This recognition brings indescribable gratitude and wonder. The complete transformation through Joel Goldsmith's consciousness approach reveals that suffering was always a case of mistaken identity. You discover that you have never actually been the limited, vulnerable person you believed yourself to be. This recognition is not philosophy, but direct, undeniable experience. Your daily experience becomes dominated by spontaneous gratitude, unconditional love, and effortless peace. Problems may still arise, but they no longer disturb your fundamental well-being. You handle challenges with wisdom and efficiency because you are no longer operating from fear or lack. The search for happiness, fulfillment, and security ends completely because you realize these qualities are inherent in your true nature as consciousness itself. You stop seeking outside yourself for what you already are. This inner completeness allows authentic enjoyment of life without desperation or attachment. Most remarkably, you begin seeing everyone and everything as expressions of the same consciousness you have discovered yourself to be. Separation becomes obviously illusory. This recognition naturally expresses itself as compassion, service, and unconditional love for all beings without exception. Your new perspective transforms every aspect of existence into a celebration of consciousness, recognizing itself. Work becomes play, challenges become adventures, relationships become opportunities for love to know itself more fully. Even ordinary activities carry an undercurrent of joy and wonder. Fear becomes impossible because you realize there is nothing separate from consciousness that could threaten it. Anger dissolves because there is no other to oppose. Sadness may arise as compassion for those who still believe in separation, but it carries no personal suffering or resistance. You live with incredible lightness and spontaneity because you are no longer carrying the heavy burden of being someone who needs to be fixed, improved, or defended. Your energy is freed up for creativity, service, and the simple enjoyment of being alive in this miraculous universe. Death loses all terror because you know yourself as the deathless awareness in which all bodies appear and disappear. Birth and death are seen as movements within consciousness, like waves on the ocean. The ocean itself is never born and never dies, and you know yourself as that eternal ocean. The ripple effects of your transformation touch everyone around you in ways you may never fully realize. Family members find themselves feeling more peaceful in your presence. Co-workers notice the stress level decreasing when you are around. Even strangers experience momentary peace when they encounter your awakened consciousness. You become a living demonstration that suffering is optional, that peace is possible, that love is our true nature. Without preaching or teaching formally, your very being communicates the truth that sets people free. You help heal the world simply by being authentically yourself. Your life becomes a testament to the power of consciousness to transform any circumstance. Whether you face health challenges, financial difficulties, or relationship problems, others witness how you navigate these situations with grace, wisdom, and unshakable inner peace that inspires their own awakening. The teaching continues spontaneously through your example long after you have forgotten about trying to be spiritual or enlightened. You discover that the highest service is simply being what you are, living from your true nature, and allowing consciousness to express itself naturally through your unique form. Joel Goldsmith's ultimate teaching is beautifully simple. You are consciousness itself. temporarily playing at being a separate person. The game is optional. Suffering ends the moment you remember what you really are, and stop trying to be what you are not. This recognition is available right now, in this very moment. Your true nature as awareness has never been touched by any experience of pain, lack, or limitation. These appearances arise within you like dreams, but they cannot harm or diminish what you essentially are. You are the screen on which all movies play, forever clean and unaffected. The practices dissolve naturally as you realize there is nothing to practice, nothing to achieve, nothing to become. You simply rest in what you have always been. This is not the end of spiritual life, but the beginning of authentic living from your true nature rather than false identity. If your understanding of suffering and consciousness has been transformed through these Joel Goldsmith teachings, like this video, subscribe for more life-changing spiritual wisdom, and comment "I am consciousness" to affirm your recognition of what you truly are.